Hello, hello, what is up, gamers? What is good? It is time for us to have another manga chat where I ramble on about series I have been reading recently. We got 5 series to talk about, so I think we'll just plunge right into it. Especially because this first series, Hell Warden Higuma, has a bit of a backstory. This is a random ass series that ran in Jump for 3 volumes, around 40 chapters in the early 2020s, late 2010s. And you might be wondering, why the heck did I read this of all things? Well, it's because a random number generator told me to. So a few manga chats ago, I got talking about just this whole ambitious project of trying to read all of Jump to become the Jump scholar, the Jump historian, something like that. I just had been totally obsessed with Weekly Shonen Jump, and honestly, I remain obsessed with Weekly Shonen Jump. And I've been going through and reading kind of all of the notable series that I can get access to. But I realized at some point, just reading the notable series, of course, that's necessary. That's kind of your foundation to understand the major cultural movements of Jump and to get the best out of the magazine and stuff. But to really kind of get an impression of what Jump is, I do truly need to just read anything and everything that's been printed in the magazine, at least that's at all accessible and available to the English-speaking world. So I came up with this idea of doing a video series a la The Beast, who is playing through the entirety of the N64 library in a random order. I pictured kind of modeling it off those videos and off of the Simpsons YouTuber, The Real Jims, in terms of the editing style, where I would bring up example panels to discuss what I was talking about and kind of give a more cohesive summary of the entire series, talk about what I liked, talk about what I didn't like, talk about how I kind of saw it placing into the overall trends and tropes and spectrums of Weekly Shonen Jump. And I had quite a vision in mind, and I started reading this because I randomly procced this series first. I had a real vision in mind of all of this. I started screen capping panels as I was reading through. I started taking notes to even make a script. This was going to be like proper YouTubing, like edited with rehearsed, flubs edited out. You would hardly recognize it as Keats the YouTube. And basically, I still think it's a good idea. I still think that's would be great content. Certainly something that I would enjoy watching, that I think I would enjoy making. But I just really didn't have time for it. And as I kind of read the series with this in mind and was always pausing to take screen caps or pausing to make notes for the script or whatever, I realized I was reading it a lot slower than I would otherwise. And that this kind of idyllic project that I really didn't have time to do. I don't have time to do that much video editing. I don't have time to write a script and record a script instead of just yapping. I realized that trying to aim for that ideal was actually going to severely reduce the amount of Jump I was actually reading, which is, of course, the exact opposite of what I want to do. But the germ of the seed of the idea where I read random Jump series in truly a random order in parallel to also deliberately reading the more notable series as I feel in the mood for them, I still like that. And I had finished reading this, and then later in the video we'll talk about another random series we procced, and then we'll proc a third random series to continue the mission. Okay, so, given all that lengthy backstory, what is Hell Warden Higuma? Well, it is about a guy who goes around modern Tokyo, or a setting not too different from it, and exorcises demons. Shocking, right? I'm sure you have never encountered anything like that in Jump before. This is part of a major trend that we're still kind of seeing the outer edge of. I think it's definitely subsided quite a bit from its peak, but I think still lingers in I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a few more Exorcist series emerging. I think the major hallmarks of the series are yes, it's just set in basically modern Japan. Not a fantasy world, not too different, not too far in the future or the past. I think this is largely due to a couple motivators. One is just that you don't have to do as much world building when you do that. You just kind of already by default get a setting, how people dress, how people act, culture, the structure of day-to-day life. Do they go to school? Do they go to work? All of these options are just kind of set up for you. You don't have to come up with all that stuff yourself. I think that is definitely very like pragmatic and appealing. I think as well, a lot of these series kind of operate through a mode wherein a relatively normal person realizes that they have the capacity to see these spirits or demons or whatever. Then they learn they have the capacity to exorcise them. But it's sort of a fish out of water story where you can really relate to the main character going from zero to being immersed in this. It kind of creates like a fantasy like that. And I think it creates an opportunity to kind of... so yeah, like I think that's just a very common main character archetype that is very befitting of this genre, this exorcism genre. If you start in a fantasy world with a fantasy hero that has had this whole fantasy life up until now that you don't really understand, that's a little harder. That takes a little more nuance and effort. And I think people just kind of like being like, hey, it's just the average high schooler just like me. Oh, wow, they found out they can fight demons. Maybe I can fight demons. It's a classic for a reason. And then finally, and I think this is what's most compelling, is that these infusing it in like modern day, modern time, modern Japan, a setting that's very close to home. You can try to kind of like haunt those spaces and kind of try to make this sort of evocative feeling of a situation that you're likely to encounter, say, taking the train late at night or walking through a back alley or going into that creepy classroom in school that you never normally go into. All of these very familiar settings can be used as the foundation for something that I think is more impactful, more scary, more intense, because it emerges from a scenario that you've seen before. And I think this is where the strength of the genre truly lies. The other two things are kind of more conveniences, if anything. But I think you can actually do some really cool moments with that. And I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of the really famous moments in big series of the genre, like JJK, I think really this whole genre is downstream from the popularity of JJK, and I guess to a lesser extent Demon Slayer. But a lot of those, it's like, oh, it's the Shibuya incident, and a lot of it takes place in like Shibuya Station, like a place that a lot of people are familiar with. A lot of the arcs take place in like going down under the bridge to investigate something, or within school itself, or the idea of like you make a friend and the friend is a little odd, but then turns out the friend gets freaking possessed by a demon. And I don't know, it's kind of like taking familiar settings where maybe you already have some sort of emotional investment, and then just kind of like taking a step into the supernatural, into the horrific, into the action-packed, as both an intensifier and as sort of like this weird roundabout catharsis. So I would say the strength of this series largely lies in doing all of this. It starts off with this average high school girl who has a chance encounter with the titular Warden Higuma. She finds out that her brother, who had been acting reclusive and acting aggressive and just generally was unreasonable, was actually possessed by a demon from hell. So again, that just sort of heightening of an already tense but very familiar scenario. Similarly, there's a later arc where it's like all the old people of the town are being harvested by this demon. And it just sort of preys on this fear of like the vulnerability of the aged, and the feeling of kind of seeing the elderly people in your life fade away from you. And again, it gives catharsis because it brings it into the supernatural direction where it can be solved through action, where you have some agency, where you defeat the demon that's doing that. and resolve this otherwise like very big, very unsurmountable problem that exists in real society. So I don't know, that dynamic, very interesting. Aside from that, very generic. I think it leans into that aspect more than other series in this genre, which I appreciate. But aside from that, it's like very generic. I would say the interesting things are the power system is pretty cool. So I should talk about the premise first off. He's exorcising demons in modern day Japan, obviously. But the conceit is that these are all prisoners from hell, and that he comes from a long line of family. There's multiple kind of families involved in this that act as hell wardens that are duty bound to track down demons from hell and send them back to hell. And the way they do that is by chopping off the demon's hands. And then if the demon is powerful enough, there's like a power scaling thing in the series where it shows you how long that demon had been sentenced to hell, and the longer the sentence, the more powerful they are. And past some certain thresholds, he then gains the ability to use those hands. So he has these hands that are like floating around him and do different things in battle, but also provide kind of other utility support. They just also let him be really lazy throughout the day, and he uses his floating hands to make food and to hold up his video game console and all this silly stuff. He's a fun protagonist. He's got a nice kind of silliness to him. He feels like an actual teenage kid. He's not too edgy or whatever. And yeah, the hand thing, I think it's fun. I think it's very funny, though, that they came up with this as the power for their main protagonist. And, you know, that your protagonist in a battle shonen should be pretty merchandisable, should be kind of like aspirationally cool. And I think having floating dismembered hands is just inherently kind of creepy. And in Jump, at the same time, they're running Boku no Hero Academia, where the main villain is a dude that has a bunch of disembodied hands clinging to him. And it's like, oh, I don't know if kids are going to think this is badass or if they think it's creepy as hell. But it is, like, I think badass in implementation. The fight scenes and stuff are good with it. Anyways, we get this introduction, and then it proceeds down very, very generic path. Stronger and stronger demons are appearing. A conspiracy of demons is working against them. We find out about his tragic past. We find out about the relationship he has with King Enma, who's like this entity that dictates the actions of the Hell Wardens and sentences people to hell and stuff. There is an element of like, he pities the demons to an extent. He feels bad that he's just sending them to hell where there's like endless torment and stuff. But I'm gonna say that even that feels pretty generic these days. I feel like that has become such a staple of genres like this where, oh, what if the demons are a little more nuanced than that? What if we were able to form a deeper connection with them, that, you know, we empathize with why they're doing what they're doing, blah, blah, blah. Again, I think this is something more downstream of Demon Slayer. But I think it fits well in this sort of modern setting because it's like, I don't know, it just sort of like makes there more potential depth and backstory to even the villains that kind of integrate into the society of it all. Yeah, we see that a lot, so that wasn't too surprising either. And then they start getting into discussions of like the morality of having the Hell Wardens contracted to this dangerous work in the first place, and the fact that children are like born into the role, and is that fair? And maybe we have to change how things work and go against King Enma themselves. And there's a whole plot line of like his aunt was almost persuaded by a demon to do just that. That again, a little more interesting, seemed to be kind of building to something interesting. And here, I guess, spoilers for this very unnotable series that ran years ago. It just ends. None of that really comes to fruition because it just ends. They have we're facing the decisive battle type ending, which I think of all the you got axed and you're trying to make the best of it scenarios, is one of the worst. Instead of having any real payoffs, instead of kind of suggesting any major change, it just brings you up to the the very outer edge of that change, and is like, okay, now they're gonna fight all the big bad guys. I think that's pretty weak. I think it's better to have and their journeys continue type ending where it's not like you're expecting to see them do a very specific thing on the next page, but rather, oh, they just still have so much to do or whatever. Here it's like they came up with a decisive plan to go up against the conspiracy of like the top level demons that have been plotting against them, and it involves the person he needs to get revenge on and all this stuff. And then they're just like, and we're gonna fight, and then it ends. And then I saw, oh, there's like an epilogue chapter, and this isn't too uncommon for Act series, that they get a chance to do a bonus chapter in the Tankobon release. A Gravity Boys that we talked about last time had this as well. So I read that, and hey, guess what? Nothing happens. It's so weird. Instead of progressing further into that final battle, that kind of promised final arc, instead it's like a totally diversionary thing where they go to a festival and one of the lieutenants of the big bad guy shows up and causes chaos, but is also a little sympathetic, and then they manage to resolve the chaos, and Higuma is like, I know who you are, you're actually the demon lieutenant. Oh, then why didn't you fight me? I don't know. And then it ends. And it's like, what the heck? You have one opportunity to put a more clean ribbon on this whole thing, and instead you do like what seems like, it really seems to me like they were told they were getting axed, and then they were told, hey, you can get another 30 pages in the Tankobon or whatever it is. And they were like, okay, I'll just use the chapters I was planning on writing before I got axed. And they didn't like go out of their way to write a new ending chapter. Instead, they just like maybe slightly retooled this one. Like there's a scene at the end where they're like watching the fireworks, and it's like sentimental, and it's like, it's the end. But like, why did we have all of this? Why not show like the big climactic battle or something, or time skip? They've already won. Like there's a lot of options you can do to make it like an actual finale. They didn't do any of them. It's definitely the weirdest part of this series. This is the total non-ending. But overall, I'd say it was really good. Or, really good. Well, it's a bit of a... Really good. It was good. It was a solid series. The art was good. The battles were good. The characterization was good. The theming and the setting and the plot lines and stuff, very, very generic. Not very interesting. I think the one kind of element that had potential was just this whole idea of like, maybe there needs to be revolutionary change. Maybe we need to end the idea of hell to begin with. We need to end the hell wardens. But they basically just kind of like brought it up, and then it didn't really go anywhere in the time that they had for the series. Likewise, I think a lot of the powers were really cool. The idea of him having all these different hands he can use and like swapping between them and stuff. It's pretty sick nasty, but again, just didn't really have the time to get it off the ground. I think he inherits like 2 extra sets of hands, and we don't even see half the ones that he does have, what they can do. It definitely felt like something with a lot of ambition behind it, which is good. Like they set it up so that he could be powering up and gaining new abilities and stuff from every major arc for a long-ass period of time, and unleashing hands in his repertoire for niche situations, or I didn't want to do this is my final resort, I'm using hand 7. Oh my god, we never saw hand 7. Seemed like they had planned for all sorts of moments like this, but it just never really came to pass. So yeah, I would say this is one that like, you can say, oh, it's like a wasted potential because it got axed before it could really get into its stride. But at the same time, I think you gotta make it a little more interesting from the jump in order to not get axed. So, I mean, that's just how it goes. All right. That's Warden Higuma, though. The first in my random reading program to just truly try to randomly sample jump the breadth of it and not just the depth of good series. So, yeah. All right. Next, we're going to talk about Wombs. This was the third manga chosen, as part of our monthly manga reading club, which I'm really, really enjoying. Next, we're reading World Is Mine, which I think is a delinquent manga from the 70s. So we're pulling from all different demographics, all different genres, all different eras of manga, all different magazines. It's great. It's great, especially as Jump obsessed as I've been lately. It's very healthy for me, I think, to get doses of other genres besides Battle Shonen. And this is about as different as it can get. This is just straight up hard sci-fi, very dense science fiction loaded with concepts and ideas and mysteries that divulge themselves through the conceptual framework that's been established. I almost don't want to tell you anything about it because I thought it was quite good, and I think it's really worth a try, no matter who you are, no matter what conceptions you have of your taste and stuff. I think it is just so unique in terms of its presentation and its subject matter, and just the general like tone and vibe of it are really unlike anything else I've read. And I think it's one of those series that it's not going to hit for everybody. You know, I think a lot of people are going to find it a little too confusing or a little too distressing or just not that engaging. But maybe like 1 in 10 people, it's just going to be like, boom, that's one of my favorite series now. So I'd say just plunge into it and don't keep watching this. Just skip ahead to the next series. Because I do want to talk about it more in depth, but I don't want to spoil anything. I think the best way to go into this is just totally blind. I would encourage not even reading a synopsis first. Because to me, the most engaging part of it, the part that I found most enthralled by, was just trying to figure out what the hell is going on and to kind of speculate and make theories and to see those theories be proven or disproven as kind of more knowledge and more chapters as you take them in and digest them and try to reframe what you think is going on. Okay, so that's that. Go read it. Check it out. See you when we talk about the Fable Second Contact. For the rest of you who have already read it or really don't care or are just kind of curious about what it's about because you don't really want to read it, but you want to know, this is a story about humans colonizing an alien planet. Okay, this is what I would encourage. I'm going to start describing the plot kind of in the order that you learn things and kind of give some commentary on what I thought about it and stuff. And the second that it starts sounding interesting to you, I would encourage you to just pause and go read it. And I'll just kind of keep trying to entice you with different little twists and details and stuff. But again, almost none of this you know right away if you haven't read a synopsis. You're just plunged into it in the depth of media res, and you have to figure out what the hell is going on. Okay, so humans are colonizing this planet. They've been there for quite a while. There's another force called the Seconds that are waging war on them. They seem to be far more technologically superior, and it seems like the colonizers are kind of losing their stakehold on the planet. But the main way that the colonizers can fight back, that the Seconds have no access to, is through a special unit called the Transfer Corps. And the Transfer Corps... Transfer Corps. That word is pronounced core, right? I recently... Oh, no, that's not good. That's an embarrassing flub. Anyways, the Transfer Corps consists of all pregnant women. And we join our cadets, our people, our women that have just joined the Transfer Corps, as they prepare to become pregnant. And it's not really clear why the hell this is or what they're planning on doing. But slowly you realize that what they're being impregnated with is this thing called the transfer organ, which is part of a native alien species. And once they have the transfer organ in them, they inherit the ability of these aliens to navigate and warp themselves long distances across the terrain of the alien planet. And the reason they're called the transfer corps is that not only do they warp themselves, but they can warp any objects or people within this small bubble. And the way they warp is by going into the coordinate space, which is like this other reality that is laid over the real physicality of the world, but is like strange and hallucinatory and is basically built up of their memories collectively, that they kind of build a new terrain within the coordinate space to help each other navigate, and that it's sort of like the Minecraft nether distances you cover in the coordinate space translate into way larger distances on Earth. And you can see this is obviously extremely important for warfare. They can just warp troops around, they can do raids and then retreats, they can warp in bombs and explode them. But the navigating through coordinate space is instead this extremely kind of trippy, psychedelic, dreamlike state of hallucinations and losing track of where you are in reality, and losing track of who you are, and so that's kind of the main premise. It's all about this one transfer corps member who displays remarkable talent in navigating the coordinate space and may herself become a colonizer, which is the term for transfer corps members that can actually secure new transfer points and go into the novel, unexplored areas of coordinate space, which of course is really, really important if they want to make ground against the seconds. And I like that. So that's the premise. Yeah. But it approaches everything like so holistically from this point, and it's kind of like this single moment, the single character, her journey becomes this locus that unfolds in a whole bunch of different directions simultaneously. And again, you're not really taught much of this, and it's not like there's a blurb on any given page that summarizes everything I've said just now. Instead, you're just really kind of piecing it together from incidents. The first like dozen times the characters go into the coordinate space, it's just like, what the hell is this? Like, what are they doing? I don't know. What does this mean? Even by the end, there's a lot of really ambiguous things about the coordinate space that I think they kept deliberately ambiguous, such that you don't really think too hard about the science, which I guess means that it's not hard sci-fi. I don't know. I don't really know the definition of hard sci-fi. All I know is that this is not just a fantasy series, but dressed up in science fiction. This is a series that is mostly about like the strange ideas contained within, which I found very, very refreshing and very, very engaging. Past that, there's all sorts of other twists. You learn the true identity of the seconds, which I had managed to predict early on, which felt great. You learn the true identity of the aliens whose organs they use to do this. You learn a lot more about what the humans' relationship are with them, and what it means for them to have this transfer organ and all of that. And then in other directions, you learn about the politics behind everything that's happening, the history behind everything that's happening. You get more in depth into the history of the transfer corps and all the kind of like groundbreaking moments they had in discovering how to use this technology and all the tragedies that resulted in stuff. I don't know. It's like, it really does kind of like blossom outwards from this one kind of seed idea to really try to look at the full scope of this world and this war and these characters. I wouldn't say all of it worked for me like equally well. All the stuff around like the coordinate space and the transfer core and just this very mysterious technology there really, really engaged me. Plus, I liked kind of the more grand political story of the humans and the seconds and their negotiations and their kind of views on who legitimately has the right to settle on the land. All that stuff was great. The character moments were a little more hit and miss for me. it's just a lot of characters. And I don't really think there's room to care about all of them as like people. In the end, it's like they're so overwhelmed by a sense of duty in most cases. Like, and this is the theme of the story is you know, this idea of essentially loaning your womb to the military effort to sacrifice this part of yourself, this inherent part of life, as war collateral, as a you know, like, that in itself is a very interesting and complex theme that emerges, but at the same time it's like they don't really feel like human beings you can engage with because they're all in the transfer corps, which already suggests like a certain abandonment, which already puts them so far away from us in terms of perspective. Plus, like, at a certain point, a lot of the stuff within the coordinate space, as I said, is very kind of trippy and dreamy, and it's all about you can kind of manifest your own real memories to serve as like guideposts and structure within the coordinate space. But it's like a shared dream where people who had explored the coordinate space before them, the previous generation of transfer corps, have left their own hallucinations and memories and stuff. And at a certain point, a lot of the drama starts to become tied up and unfolding due to the relationship between all of these unreal entities within the coordinate space. And at times like that, I also started being like, okay, I don't know, got a little exhausting. But I don't know. Overall, I was very impressed. It's just so far removed from pretty much anything else I'd read. The art style is really cool too. Very kind of impressionist and evocative at times. And I think overall, yeah, like the flow of information I always just found really, really engaging. It's always this like very balanced dynamic of there's like these really lingering mysteries. What are the Nibas? What is the transfer organ? What is coordinate space? Who are the seconds? And then you'll kind of just be like piecing it together bit by bit. And then every once in a while, they just have like narration bubbles. You know, an omniscient third party just explains like a random chunk of history to you. And then you're just like, oh, that actually answers like 5 other questions. And introduces like 3 other questions. And it's just kind of like the perfect kind of stringing you along, engaging you, encouraging you to speculate, without it ever just sort of feeling like red herring, nothing's gonna get answered. Everything in the series had like really satisfying answers. What's interesting too is there is a sequel series to this. It leaves, I guess this, we're already in kind of a spoiler section, but it ends on quite both an ambiguous but very definitive note where something major does happen, but then it's also kind of like, okay, now what? And I thought that was a great ending, so I was kind of surprised to hear that there was a sequel series. But unfortunately, that hasn't been translated into English. It has been translated into French, and like any bon Canadien, je parle un peu français. De rien, je trouve fuck. I can't remember it that well. I haven't really learned French since I was in high school. But I think I might get by. So we might try reading that in French. I would say like my French and my Japanese are like kind of around the same level, except that reading stuff in Japanese takes like way, way longer. Like in French, there's just way less of a gap because I know how to pronounce everything at least, or close enough that I can like kind of mull it over and recognize it and get a lot of like freebie loan words and just similar words and stuff. Whereas Japanese, it's just like when I get to the edge of the stuff I actually know, then it's just like impossible. Then I'm just like Googling kanji by radical and being like, what the fuck could this mean? So yeah, I feel a little more confident tackling it in French, I guess. So we'll see. Okay, next let's talk about the Fable Second Contact In the last edition of this, I talked at some length about the Fable, how much I loved it, how much I felt addicted to it. I just marathoned through the whole thing in the course of like 3 or 4 days or something ridiculous. And I'm not gonna lie, as soon as I finished, I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna wait a bit before I go to part 2. There's no way I'm just gonna start reading part 2 right now, right? I need to let it breathe. I need to read some other stuff in between. And that lasted like 3 days. And then I was like, I could go for a little more Fable. And then of course I read through Second Contact in the span of like a couple days again. I had heard from a few people that I should expect kind of a step down in quality between the first part and the second part, whereas the first part is like a modern classic of manga, one of the best examples of its genre, something that pretty much every manga fan owes it to themselves to at least try. The Second Contact arc is just good. It's just a good series, but nothing that deserves all that superlatives. And I guess I generally agree with that. I really, really did enjoy it. But I think in the end, it's just kind of like, it felt just like another arc of the Fable. Like, it didn't really feel like it had the gravity and the newness and the complexity and like the scope to really justify being the second part in the same way that like JoJo's part 2 is different than JoJo's part 1. Not that I expected that like Akira would disappear and it would be a whole new cast or something. That would be crazy as well. But is it Akira or Rika? It's Akira. But I did kind of think it would be like a brand new adventure of sorts. Whereas instead, it is still mostly the same cast, still the same setting, and it's just kind of like a new enemy appears that they have to deal with. And that's kind of most of the arcs in part 1 as well. It's just kind of like a larger arc. I think it's interesting too that in terms of like the power scaling, which is kind of a strange word to use in this series, but in terms of just kind of like how much the characters are tested, not necessarily like the stakes, but like how on the line stuff feels, how much of like a climax it is. I would say this arc didn't feel as crazy as like the Yamaoka arc at the end of part 1. I would say it's like a step down in terms of all of those qualities from battling against Yamaoka, another Fable member. Here they're battling some frickin' schlubs. Dude, Rumor? Who is that? Everybody's getting owned. So yeah, this arc details the war between Maguro, which is the Yakuza family that takes in the Sato siblings and all this, versus the other Yakuza family, which has a name that isn't coming to mind. And they each are affiliated with their own mysterious assassin group. The other Yakuza family has Rumor, and then the battle between the Yakuza families ends up being just kind of a front for the battle between these two assassination groups. But like I said, we never really... Rumor doesn't really aura farm. We don't really have a reason to think that they're going to be like better than Fable. Right from the get-go, I think we're kind of encouraged to think that they're like totally out of their league and they're going to get owned and stuff. And there are some like twists and some kind of explanations of what Rumor is that are quite cool and quite interesting. But they don't really change the fact that you're kind of going in thinking like, oh, okay, these are like good dudes, but they're not going to be at the level of Akira. And then they're not. Moreover, they're not at the level of Akira's other buddies that are ex-Fable that hang out with him now. And they're certainly not on the level of Yamaoka. Yamaoka was like kind of outmaneuvering them at times. Like, so I don't know. I found that interesting. And then the major climax of it all is just this very, very long battle in a park where there's like multiple conflicts happening. It's like an all good guys versus all bad guys scenario. All these little situations kind of playing out. It goes like 4 or 5 volumes long. And it's like really cool on the one hand that this is kind of the most ambitious big battle scene they've done. And I think they did a really good job kind of like creating a coherent sense of time and space and having all these kind of different interplaying incidents unfolding. It felt like something out of like One Piece, you know, like having a big battle at that scale while still having zoomed in moments in all these different spots, and then having all the zoomed in moments connect with each other. And I was like, ooh, this is good, this is good, this is cooking. But it's like just that for so long, for like way longer than any such battle in part one. And I kind of started like missing all the other elements of the series, like having little slice of life scenes, having comedy scenes, having relationship scenes, having, you know, just the full complexity of the characters' lives, and not just gunplay, fight, punch, kick, hide. So it started getting a little exhausting by the end because of that too. Aside from that, lots of really great stuff though still, especially in those elements I mentioned, like before they get into the real severe battling. There's a lot of great stuff going on. The lead up to this big conflict, where there's such a complex web of who knows what and who is kind of trying to kill who, and who's been drawn into this beef, and the way that it's bound up with like succession in Maguro, who's going to be the next leader of Maguro, and all these beefs from way back that a lot of the low-level grunts have history with one another. And then, of course, some seemingly totally unrelated incidents start getting worked in. I'm like, that's classic Fable. That's the stuff it's so good at. Just these moments of like dawning realization or dramatic irony where two disparate plot threads are gonna just get so tangled within themselves, and then just kind of almost by coincidence brush up against each other, and then you just go, oh shit, I see where this is going. So again, it's really just kind of this one big arc, but probably the entire first half of the series is just kind of building up to that true conflict, and all that stuff was so kino. The idea too that it's like at the end of part one, Akira sets off on this quest of atonement, where he wants to track down family members of people that he killed, and just kind of understand the impact that he truly had. That I was like, damn, that's cool. I guess that's what the later parts are about. And just kidding, it's a fake out. Because of COVID, he ends up not doing that. And instead they just hang out in an RV, and he works as a rental uncle. And I was just like, all right, you know what? I'm not mad about that. I think that's like a funny fake out. And it just kind of lent this more a feeling of it being kind of like an intermission part, maybe. I do think they're going to get back to that plot line eventually. That might have some more emotional weight to it. But instead, all the rental uncle stuff is great. There are some kind of sentimental moments to it too, but a lot of just really insane stuff. And his Fable comrades are doing that as well, which leads to a lot of really funny moments. All this stuff with his sister and his former boss is great too. Like, I don't know, I've really come to love these characters. I've really come to just love the way the author builds up these scenarios, and whether it's death combat or a Christmas party or whatever, and everything in between, it's with that same kind of like nuanced respect to the characters, and the respect for everybody kind of having their own emotions, their own personality, their own motivations. I don't know, man. It's really good. I really enjoyed it. I definitely, once again, like, wolfed it down. Yes, waiter, more Fable, please. And then I immediately read part 3 as well. Now I'm up to date on part 3. Part 3 is only like 15 chapters in or something, so that didn't take long as well. Interesting plotline there, bringing back some elements that they introduced way back in part 1 that I did not think would ever become relevant again. And I can tell there's like a long kind of build-up happening. Little plot threads are kind of slowly getting pulled out one at a time from different scenarios, and I can see it's all gonna get like woven tightly again together once more. I just kind of hope that it's not like this one was very much one huge build-up and then one huge conflict and then we're done. I hope it's more like the first one, where it's a series of smaller arcs, smaller confrontations, antagonists that are just there for one arc, and then we kind of move on to a new scenario. I just think that kind of fits the rhythm of the series better, because then you can have stuff going on in between, you know, downtime, you have some catharsis, some moments of relief. But we'll see. It seems like the author is really just in it to do it. Like, he seems to really enjoy writing the series. He seems to enjoy the fan base. I found out from the internet friend that recommended this that there's like a bar that he modeled the bar in the Fable after, where a whole bunch of the people that he modeled characters after hang out, and he just goes and hangs out at the bar and has a drink with like the real world components of all these characters, and it just has a merry old time as far as I can tell. So my hope is that this just kind of goes on and on and on. This is kind of like the Golgo 13 of our generation, perhaps. That's maybe a bit much, but you know what I'm saying. Like, I just think the characters are so rich, and they're so good at so many kind of like genres of story. I think there's like limitless potential for this series. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. Part 3, good so far. Part 2, very good. Not as good as part 1, but that's what everyone told me, so I wasn't surprised. Yeah. Alright, next we've got Shoten, which ended. I think about a week ago, the last chapter came out. I really like this series. If you want to hear me talk about it in some more depth, check out my top 20? How many did I do? 50? No, 50 seems like too many. Maybe I did 20. My top 20 manga of the 2020s so far. Or 25? I don't know. Okay, whatever. I talk about it quite a bit in there. Basically, this is a series about manzai comedy, about this duo that attempts to make waves in high school manzai competitions. I think it's really good. It's like genuinely funny a lot of the time, as you would hope when they're depicting the comedy routines. But I think it also does a really good job getting into the actual science behind manzai, for lack of a better term, the kind of rules and cause and effect structures and intent that emerges through manzai, in a way that very similarly Akane Banashi dives into Rakugo and kind of extracts the strategic the skeleton that underlies the art form. I think it does it to really great effect, to the extent that by the end of the series I could tell how well a routine was going. Not just, you know, from obvious signifiers like showing the audience laughing or not, but I could like start to anticipate the judges' comments and start to anticipate the analysis of, oh, they're going for more lighthearted banter now. Oh, this remark's a little more cutting. They're going for that. They're going for physical comedy, but don't they realize the act on two before them had a more elaborate physical comedy routine, and they're still going to be eclipsed? It got me thinking on that level, which was very fun and very engaging. Although sometimes, I pointed this out, I think probably every time I talk about this series, but it's like, just the juxtaposition of, and Akane, I think, kind of has this too, but Akane, I think, is a little more discreet about it, I guess I would say. Whereas here, they go full sports shonen mode, which is, you show the person doing the sport, or in this case, comedy, and then you have the reactions of the rivals going, ooh, he's so good. Oh, man. Or, oh my God, I'm witnessing the birth of a prodigy. Or, I'm sure I can get my revenge, or whatever. All these, like, really intense remarks. But it's like they're doing goofy-ass slapstick humor, and then it cuts, and they're going, the timing of that Tsukomi, it's like nothing I've ever seen before. A Tsukomi that witty, delivered with that punchiness and speed. I don't know if I'll be able to match that. And it's just like, what? It's just such a strange, surreal juxtaposition that I think, I don't know. At a certain point, I felt like they were even leaning into it. Like, maybe that was supposed to be part of the comedy, too. But yeah, it's really good stuff. I think, like I said, they do a great job kind of, like, bringing out all the interesting qualities of manzai, both as art form and competition. It made me really wish that my listening skills, this is where I'm really most lacking, is in listening skills, were good enough that I could like listen to Manzai comedy, because it has such a history. It has so many movements and stars and cult followings and historic battles and all these things that I think I would be really, really curious to explore and like actually listen to routines and listen to. But like, man, like parsing jokes, especially at the speed that Manzai performers talk, that's a tall order. That's a tall order. Anyways, so it ended. Let's talk about the ending a bit. That was my recommendation. Now it's spoilers. So they win the big contest. Hooray, hooray. I liked, though, that they won, but there's a few things I like. One is that this series has a... I feel like I talked about this in a video already, but maybe I was just telling my boyfriend. This series has like a Bakuman-style hook to it, where the main character has this like lost crush that in the decisive moment where he feels like he should have confessed his feelings, he froze up and he didn't, and that's one of the reasons he's getting into Manzai, is to discover that courage and stuff within himself. And it doesn't really get brought up at all after that initial setup and hook. It's just sort of like the motivator for his character. But then in their big decisive winning routine, it goes back to that. And it's a very fun, very heartwarming routine about him trying to find the courage to confess but not being able to do it, and what kind of support would he have wanted, and blah, 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 blah. Man, I'm getting crazy deja vu explaining this. I think it was just explaining to my boyfriend. Okay, whatever. And you're going to hear it again. If you're like, no, it's because you covered the series 2 weeks ago in Manga Chat or something, I'm going to be embarrassed. But you're going to hear it again. So it's really cool because it feels very much like a climactic finish, that they bring back that plot element in this like really beautiful, sentimental moment. And then you find out she's in the stands watching, and you're like, what the hell? How did that happen? But then you find out that not only is it that, but this was more them making a deliberate play on the meta level of the competition, where they have a very sweet, heartwarming routine. They go on second to last. The last place performers, who are actually the chosen ones to win, are like known for their very scathing, very bullying, very like punching down style of comedy, where they make fun of specific tropes and characters and stuff. And it's like they had this plan where they knew the performers scheduled in front of them were also likely to do heartwarming, sentimental routines. And since those are mostly recurring characters, and because this is one of those mangas where everybody has to have a sad backstory, so before every performance you get to learn about how they got into Manzai comedy, and of course there's something sad there. So it makes sense that they're doing all these like heartwarming routines for their big climactic moment. So you don't really think about it. But then they're like, yeah, we noticed there was going to be 4 heartwarming acts in a row, so we knew we could feed off that energy and have the most heartwarming, sentimental one of all. And then those guys would go on next, do their mean routine, and bomb, because nobody's in the mood for that. It's going to come across as so cruel and harsh and unfunny. And it plays out like that. It's super cathartic, super triumphant. It's just brilliant, I think, to kind of like have your cake and eat it. Have this like really cliche, of course they're going to do that, super sentimental moment as the finale, but then be like, actually, that was the decisive strategic play. That was optimal. I think that's so good. So yeah, that really impressed me. And then, what impressed me even more, they have the scene after where he reunites with the girl, and they're chatting, and she's telling him how proud she is of him, that he had all this courage and was able to do that, and blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, well, you want to go get dinner and catch up some more? And she's like, I'm here with my boyfriend. He's the one that got me into Manzai comedy, actually. He's a big fan of yours. And I was just like, man, that's great. Because like, that's so much more realistic. That's so much more realistic. And then they show that the main character, he's not like that down about it. He's just like, ugh, okay. And then, he's like dejected, and he's like, well, I guess that's over. This like smoldering crush he'd had in his heart all these years. But he's just like, yeah, it is what it is. And then from there, I don't know. I thought that was so great. Oh, I'm here with my boyfriend. Oh, no. I can't remember a time I've seen that, because I've seen a million of the Bakuman style hook of, I'm doing this all for my love, and when I achieve it, maybe we'll be reunited somehow magically, or not magically or whatever. In Bakuman, they had like an agreement. Here though, it's oh, it's great. So after that, I really like too. It's not just like, oh, and then after that they had tremendous success and they were the beloved stars of the world. Instead, it's like, okay, they won that one competition, but they're not like the GOATs. They won the competition by pretty slim margins. And there's a chapter that's just showing them like trying to desperately get to the next steps. He still has issues with stage fright. They haven't like totally solved all of the issues that they dealt with throughout the series. They're trying to get advice from this legend of Manzai, which is great. Just this kind of like standalone chapter that I think does a great job just showing like the grind of Manzai comedians. Like, it's not this kind of fantasy thing where you win this one contest and then you go to Disney World and you're good. But instead, just this continual process of improving and seeking out opportunities and competing and blah, blah, blah. And then the very last chapter, they do big time skip. And they're back in competition. And it's like, yeah, they had some rough years where they were trying to find themselves. But now they're ready to be on the big stage again. They've just had the preliminary round of the adult version of the tournament they won in high school. And it's this whole very fun thing of like checking in on all these characters and seeing them react to their performance and speculate on whether or not they'll make it into the finals. But what pissed me off, I think it's really good. I think it conveys the spirit of the series so well. I think the way they brought the characters into the future and stuff was fantastic. There's one thing, and unfortunately it's a very key thing that pissed me off, which is that the whole time they're going, they stunned us with that unconventional routine. Could you even call that Manzai comedy? It definitely got the biggest reaction, but who knows if it'll pass on to the finals because it's just so unlike anything we've seen. And the main character going, I realized that why was I trying to do Manzai like everyone else? I don't know if it'll work or not, but let me tell you, the joy of running forward into the untouched snow. It's like, this is so Kino. I wonder what their routine is. Guess what? I'm still wondering. They don't tell you. They just keep talking about this legendary, mind-breaking, never-before-seen style of Manzai comedy they just executed. But you don't find out what it is. It just ends with them finding out they made it to the finals. That's it. And I was like, that's cheap. That's cheap. That's a cheap move. That's a cheap move. Come on. Give us a hint at least. Give us a taste. I don't know. I mean, what can they do? Like, what are they supposed to come up with a mind-blowingly new form of Manzai comedy themselves? I don't think so. But like, I don't know, something. If you can't do that, maybe don't structure the final chapter like that. Very frustrating. Anyways, great series though. I really, really liked it. I kind of feel like rereading the whole thing now that it's done. I would encourage anyone to check it out if you, for some reason, are watching the spoiler section and haven't read it and still want to read it. All right, finally, let's talk about Doron Dororon. This was my second proc in terms of random jump reading. And guess what? It's about a high school kid living in modern day Japan who goes around exorcising demons. Isn't that crazy? Where have I heard that before? All jokes aside, I mean, that's not a joke, that's what it is, but yeah, this ran for five volumes, sizable year-long run, and I actually quite enjoyed it. I liked it more than Warden Higuma, but not a ton more. They're kind of around the same tier for me. And yet again, the premise is very, very generic. There's demons called Mononoke that have shown up semi-recently in modern Japan, and they attack people, and that's no good. And there's a samurai corps that is empowered to fight back against them because they have the spiritual powers to fight against Mononoke. And then there's a league of shadowy evil Mononoke scheming for the downfall of humanity. You've heard it all before, folks. You've heard it all before. Oh, but get this. He finds, our main character here, finds a friendly Mononoke who actually wants to help him defeat unfriendly Mononoke and bring peace and happiness to the world. Have you ever heard that before? Pochita, is that you? No, for real though, it's like, it's very, very generic. On all levels, it's very generic. Even the like kind of second order plot elements are still very generic. The tone of it, I found very, very fun, very, very enjoyable. All the characters have like huge personalities, some of them very goofy. Everything has this like very spirited, fun energy, even when it gets quite violent, and it is surprisingly violent at times. There's all these life or death battles and stuff, but it manages to keep up a really fun rhythm, really fun interpersonal relationships, all the characters that get introduced throughout the series. I just was excited to see more of. I just wanted to see our main guy interact with them more. I would just say it's like very, very solid on all those metrics. The fight scenes were great. The art style is great. Nothing mind-blowing, nothing too original. The power system and stuff's likewise, nothing too original. Of course, you get the higher ranked demons and the higher ranked samurai that have aura farming moments and stuff. Nothing very original, but I think very solid. And I think just in terms of like tone, this sort of very fun, very bright, very explosive and fast style is my favorite. If I'm going to be reading something that's so just going through the motions of the genre trappings, I would prefer it to have that sort of attitude than something edgy or self-serious or mopey or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. I quite enjoyed it. The ending was good too. They didn't blow it. Much, much better than Warden Higuma, which just left me scratching my head. They definitely do speedrun to the ending, you know. Everything gets wrapped up like at an accelerating pace. Okay, and fight this bad guy, fight this bad guy. Oh, this is the big bad thing. This is the final thing. This is the thing. Okay, it's done. Good. We made it. But that's okay. And then they had the postscript chapter. The what am I trying to say here? What's that called? I said it earlier to talk about the Warden Higuma chapter. The epilogue. They had the epilogue chapter. And there they did great, I think. They just showed, like, life after the big incident. And it was, like, very sentimental and slice-of-life-y. And it just kind of got us caught up with all of these really likable characters. And just showed little slices of their lives and stuff. And ended on, like, a very kind of sweet moment of... and they achieved their dreams. And I was like, that's how you do it. That's how you do it. Just get all that shit wrapped up. I don't care what it takes. Just get it across the finish line. And then just for the fans that bought the tankobon, just show all the characters like happy and smiling and high-fiving and stuff. What else do you want? What else do you need? So yeah, I don't know. Not a whole ton I can say about this series. It probably won't really linger in my memory too much. But I had a fun time reading it. I really did. I read the whole thing quite quickly just because I was enjoying myself. Not because I had some great need to see what would happen next. I kind of knew what would happen next. But I just was happy to see more of it. So yeah. Now let's roll a new series. I think this is exciting. I was excited to do this. Random number generator. So right now, random password generator. That's not what we want. Random number generator. So right now I have 70 series that are on the Viz app that have been serialized in Weekly Shonen Jump. We're gonna start with those. I know that there's a ton more that have unofficial scans and stuff, but I don't know. For no particular reason, we're gonna proc from this list. I guess because I just haven't put together that list of all the Jump titles that are fully scanlated that I can read. But I should. Anyways, for now we've got 70. We're gonna proc from 1 to 70. 46. And 46 is Tokyo Shinobi Squad. Let's find out about that. All right. In future Lawless Tokyo, Retribution, probably on demons, delivered by Shinobi, who are probably exorcists. Anyways, this was 27 chapters and it ran in 2019. Let's get at it. I'll see you in the next one. We'll talk about this. We'll talk about maybe some others that I procced. We're going to talk about the Kinnikuman sequel, which I'm reading now. And we'll talk about The World Is Mine, the next monthly manga probably. And we'll talk about Witch Hat Atelier, because I'm getting caught up on that. So look forward to that. See you next time.